You wake up with a plan, a strong intention to finally take control of your day, to stop delaying, to stop wasting time, to become productive and focused. But before you even begin, something pulls you away, something subtle yet powerful, and suddenly you find yourself scrolling, watching, distracting yourself, telling yourself you will start soon. But soon turns into later, and later turns into never. And by the end of the day, you feel that familiar frustration, that quiet disappointment in yourself, wondering why it keeps happening, why you cannot seem to break free from this cycle. And the truth is, it is not because you're lazy. It is not because you lack ambition. It is because your brain is wired in a way that makes procrastination feel good, at least in the moment, because your brain is constantly seeking reward, constantly trying to protect you from discomfort. And whenever you face a task that feels difficult, uncertain, or overwhelming, your brain interprets it as something to avoid, not because it is dangerous, but because it requires effort. And effort means energy, and your brain is designed to conserve energy whenever possible. So instead of pushing you toward the challenge, it pulls you toward something easier, something instantly satisfying. And this is where dopamine comes in, the chemical that drives motivation and reward, the chemical that makes you feel good when you do something pleasurable. And every time you choose distraction over action, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine, reinforcing that behavior, teaching your mind that avoidance leads to pleasure. And over time, this creates a loop, a pattern that becomes automatic, where the moment you feel discomfort, your brain immediately seeks escape. And the more you repeat this loop, the stronger it becomes, until procrastination feels like a natural response rather than a conscious choice. And this is why it can feel so difficult to change, because you're not just fighting a habit, you're working against a system that has been reinforced over and over again. But here's the important part. If your brain can learn this pattern, it can also unlearn it, because the same system that creates procrastination can be used to create productivity. The same dopamine that rewards distraction can be redirected to reward action. And it starts with something simple, something small, because when a task feels overwhelming, your brain resists it. But when you break it down into the smallest possible step, when you tell yourself you will just begin for a minute or two, the resistance becomes weaker. The task feels manageable, and once you start, something shifts, because action creates momentum, and momentum makes it easier to continue. And as you keep going, your brain begins to associate action with progress, and progress with reward, slowly replacing the old loop with a new one. And this is how change begins, not with massive effort or perfect discipline, but with small, consistent actions that gradually rewire your brain. And another key factor is your environment, because your surroundings influence your behavior more than you realize. If distractions are always within reach, if your phone is constantly nearby, if your workspace is cluttered and chaotic, your brain will naturally gravitate toward the easiest option, the quickest reward. But when you design your environment for focus, when you remove distractions, when you create a space that encourages productivity, you make it easier to act and harder to procrastinate, and this small shift can have a huge impact on your ability to stay focused and consistent. And there's another powerful technique that can help you take control, and that is acting immediately, because hesitation gives your brain time to create excuses, to justify delay, to pull you back into the cycle. But when you act without overthinking, when you count down and move before your mind can argue, you break that pattern, you interrupt the loop. And over time, this becomes a habit, a reflex that replaces procrastination with action. And as you continue to apply these strategies, you begin to notice a change, not just in your productivity, but in your mindset. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who procrastinates, but as someone who takes action, someone who follows through, someone who does what needs to be done even when it is not easy. And this shift in identity is what makes the change last. Because once you believe you are the kind of person who acts, your behavior begins to align with that belief. And the more you reinforce it, the stronger it becomes. And as this new pattern takes hold, you start to feel a different kind of satisfaction. Not the quick, temporary pleasure of distraction, but a deeper, more meaningful sense of progress, the kind that builds confidence, the kind that makes you trust yourself. Because every time you take action, every time you follow through, you prove to yourself that you can. And that proof becomes the foundation of confidence. Not something based on feelings, but something built through consistent effort. And this confidence changes the way you approach challenges. It makes you more willing to step outside your comfort zone, more willing to take risks, more willing to push through discomfort because you know that you are capable. And as you continue on this path, you begin to realize that procrastination is not something you have to eliminate completely. It's something you can manage, something you can understand, something you can overcome by choosing a different response in the moments that matter most. And those moments are the ones where your brain tells you to wait, to delay, to avoid, and you choose to act anyway, because that's where the real change happens, in those small decisions, in those quiet moments where you go against the habitual pattern and take a step forward. And over time, those steps add up. They create momentum. They build discipline. They transform your habits. And eventually, they transform your life. And you start to see the difference. You start to see how far you have come, how much you have grown. And you realize that the person you once thought you could be is not just a possibility, but a reality that you are actively creating. And that realization is powerful because it shows you that you are not limited by your past habits, that you are not defined by your previous patterns, that you have the ability to change, to grow, to take control. And that ability is always within you, waiting for you to use it, waiting for you to take that first step, waiting for you to act. Not later, not tomorrow, but now. Because the moment you decide to act is the moment everything begins to change. And as this awareness deepens, you begin to notice the subtle triggers that once controlled you without your knowledge, the moments when boredom creeps in, when a task feels slightly uncomfortable, when your energy dips and your mind searches for something easier, something lighter, something instantly satisfying. And instead of reacting automatically, you begin to pause, to observe, to recognize the pattern forming in real time. And this pause becomes your greatest advantage, because in that brief moment of awareness, you create space between impulse and action. And within that space lies your power to choose differently, to redirect your focus, to take even the smallest step toward progress instead of falling back into distraction. And at first, this may feel difficult, even unnatural, because you're challenging a system that has been running for so long. But with repetition, it becomes easier, more automatic, until one day you realize that the urge to procrastinate no longer has the same hold over your actions. And this is when you begin to trust yourself on a deeper level, to rely on your ability to act regardless of how you feel. And this trust is what fuels consistency, because you are no longer dependent on motivation. You are no longer waiting for the perfect mood or the right conditions. You are simply showing up and doing what needs to be done. And this consistency compounds over time, turning small actions into significant results, turning daily effort into long-term transformation. And as you continue to build this momentum, you start to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You start to approach challenges with a sense of curiosity instead of fear. And this shift in perspective opens doors that were always there, but previously hidden by hesitation and doubt. And now, as you move forward with this new mindset, you carry with you the understanding that every moment is a chance to reinforce the person you are becoming. Every action is a vote for your future self, and every decision either strengthens or weakens the patterns you are building. And when you choose action, even in the smallest way, you are choosing growth, you are choosing progress, you are stepping into the version of yourself that you once only imagined, and that choice, repeated over time, has the power to change everything. Because in the end, it is not about eliminating struggle or avoiding discomfort. It's about learning to move through it, to act despite it, to use it as a signal for growth rather than a reason to stop. And when you reach that point, when you fully understand that your brain can be guided, trained, and reshaped, you unlock a level of control that most people never experience. And from that place, you are no longer held back by procrastination. You are driven forward by purpose, clarity, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself to take action whenever it matters most. And that's where true transformation begins and continues to grow every single day.